He installed the cameras to feel safe, but what he saw on the tape changed his life forever. You won't believe who ended up in his house. Watch the end. For the first time in years, Andrew Mitchell found himself with the entire house to himself. His wife, Caroline, had finally taken a few well-earned vacation days and packed up their 2 kids for a sunny escape to the Outer Banks. She had mapped out every detail of the trip, determined to give the children memories they would cherish forever. Andrew, however, stayed behind, tethered to a work project with a looming deadline. Yet, the thought of quiet, pure, uninterrupted quiet, felt like a rare reward in itself. That first evening alone, while wrapping up some late reports, Andrew heard a knock at the front door. Curious, he opened it to find his neighbor, Greg Turner, standing there, noticeably more animated than usual. Greg was the type of man who always seemed to know a little too much about everyone on the block. Without much of a greeting, he launched into an enthusiastic explanation about the new security cameras he had just installed around his property. In today's world, he claimed, it was practically a necessity. With a serious tone, Greg urged Andrew to consider doing the same, especially since he was temporarily living alone. At first, Andrew dismissed the suggestion as a bit over the top. After all, they lived in a quiet Charlotte suburb where most folks waved hello and watched out for one another. But Greg kept pushing, citing cautionary tales from mutual friends and hammering home the idea that you could never be too careful. "Peace of mind," Greg said firmly, giving Andrew a pointed look. "You'll sleep better knowing your house is covered." Later that night, Andrew found himself thinking about it more than he expected. The idea of someone walking into his home without his knowledge left a bitter chill in his gut. With Caroline and the kids away, maybe it did make sense to be a little more cautious. That very evening, he found himself browsing home surveillance systems online. One model in particular caught his eye. It featured real-time monitoring straight from a smartphone app. Compelled by an odd sense of urgency, he placed the order immediately. A few days later, the package arrived, and Andrew spent the better part of a Saturday setting everything up. He adjusted each camera to cover entry points, the garage, the backyard gate, and even the driveway. He tested the app multiple times to make sure the system was working flawlessly. When he was done, he leaned back on the couch and let out a slow breath. The cameras were up, the app was synced, and for the first time in days, he felt a strange wave of relief, like he had fortified his castle. But in his eagerness to secure everything, Andrew forgot one crucial detail. He never told Caroline about the cameras. The week passed quickly. The silence he had initially welcomed turned into a quiet longing for the chaos his family brought. When Caroline and the kids finally came home, the house lit up once again. Laughter echoed down the hallways. The scent of baked ziti filled the kitchen, and Andrew realized how much he had missed them. Their absence had made the reunion feel almost sacred. Life slipped back into its usual rhythm. Mornings were a whirlwind of getting backpacks zipped and cereal bowls rinsed. Evenings settled into peaceful routines, shared meals, reruns of old sitcoms, and late-night chats on the back porch. Caroline's presence recharged the space in a way Andrew hadn't even noticed was missing before. Then came Tuesday morning. While sipping his lukewarm coffee and clearing emails at his downtown office, Andrew remembered the security cameras. He hadn't checked the footage since installing them. Curious, he pulled out his phone and opened the app. He expected nothing, just a routine check to see if the system had captured a squirrel or maybe a delivery drop-off. But as the footage loaded, something caught his eye. He tapped the screen and rewound the clip, squinting to make sense of what he was seeing. A man, someone he didn't recognize, had entered the house. The timestamp showed it happened around midday, during school hours. The kids were definitely out, but Caroline should have been home. Andrew's brows knitted as he tried to recall if she had mentioned anything. Maybe a repairman coming by or someone checking the HVAC system. The man didn't look like any technician he had seen before. There was no uniform, no visible ID badge. His movements weren't casual or professional, they were too comfortable. Andrew played the clip again and again. Each time, the feeling in his chest grew heavier. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe it was a misunderstanding. But deep down, something about the way that man moved through his house didn't sit right. Not at all. The way the stranger moved through the Mitchells' home was deeply unsettling. Andrew watched the footage again, noting how the man walked with the ease of someone who knew every corner of the place, someone far too familiar. He tried to dismiss the thought, telling himself it could be some mix-up, maybe even an innocent mistake. But deep in the back of his mind, something began to nag at him, a quiet whisper of doubt that grew louder with each passing minute. That night, Andrew said nothing to Caroline. He convinced himself it was better not to jump to conclusions. Maybe it was all nothing. Still, he made a decision he would keep watching just to be sure. In the following days, he reviewed more footage each night, always expecting to find reassurance, to confirm his suspicions were unfounded. But even as he rationalized what he had seen, a gnawing unease stuck with him, like a shadow that refused to fade. His thoughts kept circling back to the stranger, even during moments he should have been focused on something else. 2 days later, Andrew sat down again to check the recordings. At first, he felt a strange sense of relief as he skimmed through clips showing nothing more than Caroline folding laundry, the kids playing on the porch, the mundane rhythms of life. But as he moved to the footage from earlier that same morning, his heart skipped a beat. The man was back. And this time, the stranger's movements were different, more casual, more deliberate. He strolled through Andrew's home as though it were his own, pausing occasionally to look around, to examine objects as if checking something off a list. Andrew leaned closer to the screen, his stomach tightening. This was no electrician or contractor. This man didn't belong there. The more he watched, the more everything about the footage disturbed him. The man's posture, the slow and measured steps, the way he scanned the room like he was searching for something or someone. Andrew could no longer deny it. Something serious was happening under his roof, and he had no clue how deep it went. That night, with his nerves fraying, Andrew made a choice. He installed additional cameras, one in the living room where the stranger had lingered too comfortably, and one in his bedroom. Felt invasive, wrong even, but he needed answers. And still, he said nothing to Caroline. Deep down, he knew he had to see the truth for himself before dragging her into it. He didn't want to cause alarm, not yet. Some primal instinct told him that something much bigger was unfolding, something he needed to uncover on his own. As he adjusted the final lens and watched the system connect, Andrew felt a strange sense of finality. The house now had eyes in every corner, and those eyes would tell him what he needed to know. Whether he was ready for the truth or not was a different question. Days dragged on. The house felt different, colder, heavier, like something was looming just out of sight. Andrew went through the motions each day, pretending everything was normal, laughing with his kids, having dinner with Caroline. But his mind was always elsewhere, drawn back to the silent sentinels he had installed throughout the house. Then came the day he would never forget. The kids were at school. Caroline had left earlier to run errands. The house was still. Andrew poured a coffee, sat down at his desk, and opened the camera feed. He took a deep breath before diving into the new recordings. First, everything looked ordinary. Caroline tidying up, the kids arguing over cereal, the clatter of everyday life. Andrew almost allowed himself to breathe easy. And then he found it. His hand froze on the mouse. The footage shifted to a morning clip, the same man again, clear as day. But this time he was not alone. Andrew stared, motionless, as the stranger and Caroline stood together in the bedroom. His bedroom. The one he had shared with her for over a decade. Their closeness was unmistakable. Their comfort with each other, undeniable. And then came the final blow. They embraced. Not briefly, not awkwardly, intimately, familiar in a way that made Andrew's chest tighten and his throat close. He watched, unable to tear his eyes away, as they lay down on the bed, lost in each other. The images burned themselves into his memory, each frame a brand against his heart. Time slowed to a crawl. The room around him swam and blurred. He could hardly believe what he was seeing. But the camera didn't lie. His mind reeled. His body tensed. Every breath he took felt like fire. Andrew sat back, the chair creaking beneath him, his entire body trembling with a storm of emotion. Rage, betrayal, heartbreak. It was all there, playing on a loop on his screen like a sick joke. He tried to stand, stumbled, then braced himself against the desk. He needed to speak with Caroline. He needed to see her face when he asked her what the hell had been going on behind his back. The images were seared into his consciousness. Her body language, the familiarity in her voice caught by the audio, the way she had smiled at the man in his home, in his sanctuary. There was no denying what he had seen. The betrayal was raw, undeniable, and devastating. But before he confronted her, Andrew knew one thing. Whatever came next would change everything. Forever. If you too feel the tension building, give it a like, subscribe, and write in the comments how you would act if you were the main character. And there's an even more shocking revelation ahead. Justification might have dulled the pain, or at least softened the edge of what Andrew felt. He waited until the kids had left for school that morning, trying to keep himself composed. When Caroline returned from dropping them off, she found him standing silently in the living room. There was a look on his face she had never seen before, not once in the 13 years they had been married. His hand trembled slightly as he held up his phone. His eyes, normally full of warmth, were now cold and distant, like he was staring at a stranger. Caroline offered him a puzzled smile, but it quickly faded the moment he wordlessly pressed play and turned the screen toward her. A heavy silence gripped the room as the footage played out. Caroline's expression shifted from confusion to disbelief, then to shame, and finally, despair. Her eyes welled with tears as she brought her hands to her face, trying to hide from the truth. The tears came fast, and with them, a desperate flood of apologies. "I'm sorry, Andrew. I don't know what happened. It didn't mean anything, I swear to you. It was a mistake. A stupid, meaningless mistake. I'd never do it again. Please, just believe me." Her voice cracked, her body trembling as she pleaded for a trace of mercy in his expression. But Andrew didn't speak. He didn't blink. He watched her crumble without saying a word, letting her words echo against the walls like empty promises. He had seen enough, heard enough. No matter how heartfelt her tears, no matter how many times she begged, something inside him had snapped. Caroline's voice grew smaller, desperate. She said it was a lapse in judgment, that she loved him, that it had meant nothing. But Andrew stared at her, not with rage, but with a deep and wounded disbelief. He thought of every late-night conversation, every quiet moment they had shared, every promise spoken in confidence. And now all of that trust, everything sacred between them, was broken, shattered like glass underfoot. At last Andrew spoke. His voice was quiet, but carried a steel she had never heard from him before. "I can't look past this," he said. "There's no undoing what I saw. I won't pretend nothing happened. I'm not here to fight or to scream. I just need you to understand. The trust we had is gone, and there's no way back." Caroline collapsed to her knees, sobbing into her hands. Her cries echoed through the room, but Andrew turned and walked out, his heart in pieces. He knew in that moment, the life they had built together, the one he had poured his soul into, was over. It lay in ruins, all because of something she now desperately called a mistake. The decision had been made, and although each step forward felt like agony, Andrew understood one thing clearly. Divorce was the only path left. The days that followed were like living inside a vacuum. The house felt heavier, almost haunted by the weight of unspoken truths and broken vows. Caroline tried again and again to reach him, with letters, with whispered apologies, with quiet pleas to talk, but Andrew refused to engage. He could barely recognize the life he was living, let alone the woman who had once been the center of it. As the numbness wore off, his sorrow gave way to something colder, indignation, perhaps even fury. He began researching divorce proceedings, methodically reviewing each step. But one question burned in his mind more than the paperwork. Who was the man? He could still see the man's face, etched into memory by the footage. It didn't take long to find the name. Through whispers from neighbors and shared acquaintances, Andrew pieced it together. The man was Dr. Daniel Carter, a well-known OB/GYN with a sterling reputation in the city. The irony of it all was suffocating. A doctor, a man sworn to uphold ethics and trust, had crept into Andrew's home and destroyed the foundation of his family. Worse still, Daniel was married too, with 2 young children. A man who preached family values, who wore the mask of stability and decency, had violated the sanctity of Andrew's life in the most cowardly way. But Andrew's anger evolved. It became something more precise, a quiet, burning need for justice. This wasn't just about his broken heart. This was about revealing the truth behind the curtain, about refusing to let betrayal hide behind credentials and charm. Daniel Carter had a respected name, a thriving practice, and a polished public image. But behind all of that, he had crossed a line that no man should cross. He had done it with arrogance, with entitlement, as if Andrew's world was nothing more than a casual detour. And now Andrew knew. But the weight of this truth wasn't something he could carry alone. He began to wonder, what would this revelation mean for everyone involved? For Caroline? For Daniel's unsuspecting family? For himself? Every thought echoed like a drumbeat in his head, reminding him. This was just the beginning. It was a double-edged sword, the choice between preserving dignity and privacy or exposing the truth for all to see. Andrew Mitchell wrestled with that decision in the quiet hours of the night. Bringing Daniel Carter's actions to light would send shockwaves far beyond just their lives. It would wound Caroline, devastate Daniel's family, and cause collateral damage to anyone touched by the fallout. Yet, the thought of staying silent gnawed at him with growing intensity. With each passing day, frustration churned in Andrew's gut, mixing with a fierce, nearly uncontrollable urge to reveal the truth. The image of Daniel, the polished professional who had slipped so casually into Andrew's home and into his marriage, haunted him. It followed him like a ghost, reminding him not only of what he had lost but also of what could never be reclaimed. Daniel, in his neatly pressed coat, with his well-practiced smile and a reputation built on trust and care, was living a lie, and he had destroyed lives doing it. Late one night, as Andrew sat in front of his computer, scrolling through the camera footage for the last time, a quiet resolve took hold. This wasn't about revenge anymore, it was about justice. He clipped the clearest footage, the moments that left no room for doubt about Daniel's identity or the nature of what had happened. As the final video rendered, Andrew felt a strange mix of guilt and determination. He knew what this would do to Daniel, and to Caroline, and to Daniel's wife, who until now lived in blissful ignorance, married to a man she believed was honorable. Still, something deeper inside Andrew insisted that the truth had to come out. It wasn't enough for him to know. Others deserved to know too. So when he finally posted the video, he did it without comment, without caption. There was no need for words. The images spoke with painful clarity. It took only hours for the video to spread. Views piled up. Comments exploded. And just like that, Daniel Carter's name became synonymous not with compassion or care, but with betrayal and disgrace. His professional world collapsed quickly. Patients canceled appointments. Clinics severed ties. His colleagues distanced themselves. The community that once held him in high esteem now looked at him with suspicion, anger, and disbelief. Daniel's wife saw the footage too. Within a day, she packed up their 2 kids and left their home. She refused to speak to him, refused even to share the same air. The man who had once seemed untouchable now stood utterly alone. Andrew watched all of this unfold from a distance, and the feeling that washed over him was difficult to define. It wasn't joy, not satisfaction, but something close to relief. The weight of betrayal had been heavy, suffocating. But now it had been dragged into the light, undeniable and raw. The fallout had been seismic, but necessary. Daniel no longer had a place to hide, no reputation to lean on, no house to retreat to. Everything he had built, every illusion he had crafted was gone. For Andrew, there was something strangely liberating in watching it all come undone. He found himself reflecting on his life before the betrayal, before the cameras, before Caroline's lies. He remembered how he had once taken trust for granted, had held it as something implicit, unspoken. But now he understood just how sacred, how fragile it really was. What surprised him most, though, was how the act of revealing the truth changed him. It didn't just free him from the lie, it changed the way he saw everything. The anger that had once ruled his heart began to dissolve, replaced by a strange calm. Not peace exactly, but the first steps toward it. And with that stillness came clarity. The marriage was over. The chapter had closed. But the emptiness it left behind was not a void. It was a blank page. A chance to rewrite his life, this time on his terms. Andrew began to rediscover simple pleasures. A walk through the park. The quiet satisfaction of a morning coffee. The feel of sunlight on his face without the weight of grief pulling him down. He saw beauty in things he hadn't noticed in years. He allowed himself to smile, even laugh on occasion, not because he had forgotten the pain, but because he had learned to carry it differently. He realized that vengeance, while tempting, had never truly been his goal. What he had really sought was clarity, understanding, a way to reclaim a sense of control in a life that had spun wildly out of it. And in that clarity he found strength. He no longer needed apologies or explanations, no longer longed for closure from Caroline, or answers from Daniel. The truth had already done its work. And with it came the understanding that honesty, no matter how painful, was the only foundation worth building on. There would be no more secrets, no more illusions. From the ruins of his old life, Andrew stood on the edge of something new. And in that quiet, he found a kind of peace that no betrayal could ever steal from him again. This story is over, but the conclusions from it are just beginning. Give us a like if you cared, subscribe so you don't miss new revelations, and write in the comments what you would have done in the hero's shoes. Your opinion is important.